Well, I've got a couple stories I think you'll find very interesting that happened to me a couple weeks ago, and I learned some lessons. I got fired again. That's not the first time I've been fired. I say that to encourage somebody in the lawn business. You were going to get fired if you, I would think you would. And I've been fired many times. But I typically learn something, but then the very next day something happened that sort of redeemed the situation in my mind. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to try to make the stories quick and get to the main points. Today's video is sponsored by Yardbook. I've been using Yardbook as my software to run my business since 2015. If you get fired by a customer and you need to delete them, Yardbook makes it so easy. You go down to the customer's name, there's a little trash can symbol. I hit that button and they're gone, and I don't have to worry about them anymore. In all seriousness, Yardbook is a great software. And again, I've been using it for quite some time now. So here's what happened. I do weed control and fertilization if you're new to the channel, and this was, maybe 2 weeks ago now. We're in April and warm season grasses. So I'm dealing with a lot of Bermuda and zoysia grass. If you know anything about warm season grasses in April, they don't exactly look their peak best. They're coming out of dormancy. The Bermuda's real thin. If there's shade and slopes and stuff, they look even worse. Everything's waking up. We get down in the 30s and then up in the 70s and down in the 30s, and the grass is just trying to figure out what to do. And that's it can be a challenging time for a weed control and fertilization business. So I pull up on the yard. The husband and wife's out in the yard, and they're out there working in the flower bed. And I am a moderately friendly person in general. I wouldn't say overly friendly, but when I'm out running my lawn business, I try to be a notch or two more friendly than I normally would be. And all I mean by that is I say hey more. I try to make conversation. Maybe I should do it all the time, but I say, you know what, I'm gonna be friendly. So I pull up. I've had these people for years as customers, don't interact with them very much, but I knew he had complained a little bit about his grass being thin in the front. Got a zoysia lawn, like a Myers zoysia, Z52. Pulls up, I say, hey, how y'all doing today? And they're out there, and the husband comes walking over, the wife keeps working in the flower bed. And he says, we need to get grass to grow right here. So here's the situation, very small yard, $42, I think. It seems like everybody that fires me is a $42 yard. Maybe another was $44. But anyway, he has a big tree in the front yard and very hard compacted soil, and he's got this Z52 type zoysia that's not growing well under this tree. And I remember him texting me about it in the past, and I didn't remember the exact conversation. But he comes out and he says, what's going on? Why is the grass not growing? And I start going through kind of a routine that I have done a lot of times talking to people, and I think I actually done with him. I said, well, there could be a lot of reasons why the grass not growing. I say, hey, April's not the best time to judge it. I think it will fill in. I said, one of your main issues is we got a big tree here, so it doesn't like shade. We say a grass may be shade tolerant. It doesn't mean it likes shade. There's a shade issue. I said there could also be a stump there that was there 40 years ago, and it was ground up when this lot was cleared, and there's decomposing material. I said, but that's something we don't know. I have no idea. There could be something going on in the soil that makes it where the grass doesn't grow. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking that the shade is the main issue, but I can tell as I'm talking to him, he's not satisfied with these answers. His facial expression, his body language, not happy. And he basically said, he says, I'm not satisfied with I don't know. He said, I'm tired of people telling me I don't know. And he was scared. He said, you're not the only one that's told me that. He's probably talked to other people. He said, but I'm just tired. And he looked at my truck. My company's called Alabama Lawn Pros. Has Alabama Lawn Pros on the side of the truck. He said, and this is where it kind of went south a little bit. He said, I would think somebody that had the word pros written on the side of their truck would know more than I don't know. And I thought, well, okay then. I guess we are gonna have one of those kind of days. And that was just a direct insult that wasn't necessary, and really just showed poor class on his part. And I didn't yell at him, but I did sort of defend myself a little bit. And so he says, you just do whatever you need to do. I was there to fertilize the yard. And I never had a chance to tell him, well, I think if you might try a more shade tolerant grass here, it might do better, like an emerald zoysia. because I couldn't get it out. He was frustrated. So he said, you just do whatever you need to do, and he starts to walk off. And I say, well, as he walks off, I said, is that how, and he said rude. And as he's walking off, and just kind of turned his back and walked off, and that's not how I was taught to interact with people. I said, is that how you want to end this conversation? As he's walking off. And so he turns back around, goes back over there, and you know, rants some more about the grass or whatever. And then he says, you just go and do whatever you need to do. And I said, well, I really don't think I want to at this point. I said, I don't like talking or working with people who talk down to me. And he said, all right, we'll just end it right here. He shook my hand, turned around, walked off. And as he walked off, I said, you know, if you would be a little more respectful, I think people would be willing to help you. So, did I handle that situation perfect? Probably not. I don't know. But I always feel like, I guess this would be the lesson of this. And again, I'm going to get to the next story real soon. It needs to work for both parties. You know what I'm saying? It really needs to work. And if you don't have any confidence in me, and there's another lesson of this in just a second, then you need to move on. But now here's where, and I wish I'd have known this at the time. Later that day, I searched back through the text threads with this customer. I'm like, what? I know we've talked about this. Like, what have I told this guy? Well, I found that I think about 2 years ago, I'd sent a landscaper out there. He asked me for a landscaper. I sent him a landscaper. The landscaper friend says, hey, I think I'm able to help him out. Well, guess what? Nothing ever happened with the landscaping. He was talking about sodding. Well, then last year, almost a year to the date, I had said, hey, why don't you dig out that area? I said, if it was me, you want to try it. Again, I don't know if a stump decomposed there 40 years ago or not, but what you could do is dig it out, put in a little bit better soil, and it's a very small area. I'm talking about 6 feet by 6 feet maybe. Dig it out, put some better soil, and put the emerald zoysia in, which is a more shade-tolerant variety. And that way we'd know, like, that'll give you better soil, a more shade-tolerant grass. And I texted him that almost a year to the date ago. He thumbs up the text, and guess what? A year later, he's still complaining about it, and he never did it. He never took action. And so I see this text after I done talked to him, and I thought, you know what? I'm gonna call him back. I want him to know, because he's saying here, I'm tired of people saying I don't know, and maybe it's defending my pride or whatever, but I called him back that evening. He didn't answer. I left him a message. I said, you know what? I was looking back at our text threads, and I saw almost a year ago to this date, I told you to dig it out, put emerald zoysia in there with a little bit better dirt, and I noticed you didn't do that. And so my recommendation today would be the same it was a year ago. Dig it out and put some emerald zoysia in there and see if that fixes it. So I just wanted him to know that the answer wasn't I don't know. The answer was the same answer I gave you a year ago that you didn't take action on. So here's the point. You can tell I get a little flustered about this, but some customers want to argue. They don't want the solution. If the solution's presented to them and they don't take action, it's their own fault. He didn't take action. He would rather complain than take action. And move on, hit that delete button in your yard book software and get rid of the customer and move on. So, try to keep you cool, try to be calm, try to be polite and respectful. Now, here's what happened the next day that this sort of redeemed the whole situation for me. I go to another customer, a different customer. I'm at his house, there to fertilize. Big shade tree in the front yard, Bermuda grass. That's a bad combination. And I never had any trouble with this guy. I actually enjoyed talking to this guy. He's retired, he comes out. And he's talking to me, and I thought, is this deja vu? I mean, he comes out and he says, hey, why am my grass growing on this tree? And I was like, are you serious? I said, did this not just happen yesterday? Now, this guy's got Bermuda grass, and I know I've told this guy, if you want grass under there, you could, limb up the tree, cut the tree down, or put some emerald zoysia under there if you want. That'll be one of our most shade-tolerant varieties. And he had put a few little strips of emerald zoysia in there. I'm not even talking about a whole piece. I'm talking about a few strips. And that looked pretty good. And he's like, what's going on with my grass? And he's frustrated. And I said, well, sir, you can see the emerald zoysia under there is actually doing pretty good. It's the Bermuda that's not doing it. I said, Bermuda needs full sun, and it's not getting much sun under that big tree. And he said, if it don't look any better than this next year, he said, we'll probably have to just shake hands and part ways. And I thought, hey, that's what happened yesterday. And so I actually told him, because I typically like this guy. I said, hey, you can tell he was frustrated too. I said, that's fine. I said, I got fired yesterday. And I said, all I'd ask is you just fire me politely. If you don't think I'm doing a good enough job, that's fine. You know, I love to see the lawn guy they're gonna get that's gonna make Bermuda grass grow under the shade tree. That would be a first in my opinion. So anyway, he's frustrated. I kind of, I guess, diffused the situation, told him, you know, I try to let him know, like, if you want to fire me, that's fine. Like, I don't like, no, please don't fire me. Like, I don't do that kind of stuff. Or I usually don't. And because I really don't want them. If they don't want me, I don't want them. I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's one customer. And so he said, he's frustrated. I kind of diffused a little bit. And then his whole countenance changed. And he said, you know what? He said, this ain't got nothing to do with that grass or with you. He said, basically, the stock market had done really terrible for a couple weeks. He said, I've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the stock market. And he said, I just got on the phone with the IRS, and the IRS saying they didn't receive my check from last year, and I've got to pay penalties and all this. He said, I'm just so frustrated at all these things. And he said, I was taking it out on the lawn guy. And I tell you what, I had so much respect for that guy, because it takes a lot to admit that, you know. And I actually thought the guy the day before, I said, I bet the guy before lost a bunch of money in the stock market too. You know, and he's mad like that. He couldn't admit it, and he may not have. I'm just thinking, I bet he's had a bad week too. And anyway, this guy was able to admit that, and he was using some real choice language at the beginning, and then he starts praying. And I was like, okay, he wants to pray. And he's praying, because I'm telling him the story from the day before. And he's praying. He said, you let that guy get to you, didn't you? I said, yeah, he got to me a little bit. And he's, let's pray. And he started praying. And I was like, this is a bizarre day and a half of events that I'm dealing with here. And so we talked a lot about, you know, I'm a Christian. We talked a lot about that and just different things. Well, I probably talked to him for 20 minutes about grass and everything. And he kept saying, hey, this ain't got nothing to do with the grass. You're doing a good job. And I said, well, you know, you can plant zoysia under there, and it'd probably do way better than the Bermudas, or limb up the tree a little bit or whatever. So anyway, it just sort of redeemed the situation. He was able to encourage me about what happened the day before and tell me, you know, don't let that get to you. Don't let your ego get in the way. If somebody comes at you like that, you don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to, you know, defend your pride. And it gave me a lot of perspective. And I really feel like, and this is my perspective on it, that God brought me 2 customers in 2 days. One fired me, the other was upset and was able to give me a good, and it was like day 2 redeemed day 1 in my mind, you know, because day 1 bothered me. Day 2, I was like, oh, whatever. I got fired yesterday. You want to fire me? That's fine. And believe it or not, I get a lot more customers than that lose. So just don't think I'm getting fired all the time. So it was just interesting. I was thankful for the circumstances, not so much for day 1, but for day 2 that sort of redeemed day 1. And again, these lessons, you got to have customers, got to work for both of us. Don't work for me, they don't work for you. You know, I got to get paid. You got to be happy with the service. If not, let's just be respectful and part ways. And you know, and if you're not willing to do what the person tells you to do, like, hey, you're gonna have to plant a different kind of grass if you got a shade tolerant grass, a non-shade tolerant grass under your tree. If they're not willing to do it, then you know, they're probably not a great customer to work with. So hope these stories have been encouragement to you. I get fired too. I've been gaining customers like crazy this year, thankfully, and I picked up 2 today. A retired guy called me. He thought I was the company. He's like, do you do the yards across the street? I said, no, I don't do those. I actually told him who do. I said, no, those are good guys that do those yards. He's like, oh, that's fine, you can do it. He gives me, I give him a price. He said, all right, go ahead. He said, hey, go talk to the guy 2 doors down. He just came over here and he wants to use the person I'm using. So I go down there and I get him too. I got 2 yards at 2 out of 3 houses there, and they weren't even calling me. They looked me up on Google, but they were hoping to get a different company that did the neighbors across the street. But I showed up. He's like, oh, you're fine. And I told him, I said, well, I've been in the business for 18 years, and you know, I've got a lot of yards. Anyway, I sold him on it. He took it. They were nice guys. Got paid 1 up front for the whole year. The other one put a card on file. Did it right there on the Yard Book app, right in front. Not the app, but I logged in on my phone. So thanks for watching. Hope these stories are encouraging. If you want to get in weed control and fertilization like me, go to lawncarelife.com, and we will see you guys in the next video.